The Federal Reserve keeping a lock on interest rates as we close out the year, even signaling they could start cutting rates next year. And joining us now to discuss this and more is Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Good morning to you, sir. So we are seeing a bullish outlook on the markets right now for 2024. Investors right now sort of gambling pretty big given the potential rate cuts by the Fed. So what do you make of this? And what does this mean for the average American right now?
So it's great that Wall Street is optimistic. That's a positive thing, but we have to keep in mind that the Wall Street mentality is not necessarily the mentality on Main Street. So we are seeing some more concerning factors in the economy right now. You look at labor markets in particular. Strong job markets is what helped us weather the storm through the pandemic, that helped us, when inflation was 8-9%, because the job market was so tight, we saw wages increase. But now we're starting to see signs of the job market weakening, particularly outside of education, healthcare, leisure, and hospitality. And that's really concerning for average Americans heading into the new year.
Inflation is already out of control. How does Bidenomics make it worse, Brandon?
I mean, inflation remains the number one concern for average Americans out there right now. And even though it has improved somewhat, we have a long way to go. Unfortunately, when you look at Bidenomics, it's not really about helping average Americans. It's about telling us what to do. So if you want to go out there and buy an electric vehicle for $70,000, then Bidenomics is great for you, or install a geothermal heat pump in your house. That's great. But for average Americans, it really hasn't helped us all that much. Instead, we've seen the Fed do all the heavy lifting with its rate hikes that have helped to lower inflation, but have come at a steep cost for a lot of Americans.
And of course, that leads to a lot of consumer debt. We know that right now there's millions of Americans struggling to pay off credit card bills, really at record highs right now. A lot of this debt is subject to these variable interest rates. And you say the feds need to step in and do something. What can they do?
That's the problem with the Fed just using rate cuts. It's a blunt instrument. So it created these higher interest rates that meant that Americans who have outstanding credit card debt are really getting clobbered right now. For them, they really need to focus on making sure they make those minimum payments and then hope that the Fed lowers rates to give them a little bit of breathing room. In the interim, they can do things like transfer their balances to lower interest rate cards. Unfortunately, that's not going to work for everybody. So it's a really tough situation right now that is largely caused by the fact that Congress and the president have not been working to lower inflation. They've left it all to the Fed. And because of that, we all have these enormous impacts in credit card rates, in mortgage rates, auto loans, you name it. It's all become more difficult and more burdensome from Americans.
And you say what we really need are more measures like the child tax credit, because it can help families right now really get by in this economy.
Absolutely. Americans need a little bit of relief right now, and an expanded child tax credit would help struggling families. It should be paired with some incentives to increase manufacturing output in this country, to increase the amount of research and development we're doing on American soil. That's going to help create jobs, spur economic growth, and help us weather this storm. Again, Congress has to do part of the heavy lifting. They can't leave it all to the Fed. They've been asleep at the switch, and it's time for them to wake up and start helping average Americans.
And finally, Brandon, I want to ask you about this new plan to waive the penalty fees from the IRS for those folks who failed to pay back taxes that total less than $100,000 a year. Now, these are for tax years 2020 and 2021. Now, this measure is going to cost really $1 billion in fees. So what's your thoughts on this?
I'm gonna do something surprising here, Jen. You probably never heard me say anything positive about the IRS, but I think this is actually a positive development here. We talk about an $80 billion increase to the IRS budget and 87,000 new IRS employees, all intended to twist arms and crack skulls to squeeze more money out of Americans. I would much rather see them take this approach, which is providing an incentive for Americans to do the right thing and to pay the taxes they owe. I'd rather see these types of incentives rather than those heavy-handed enforcement actions like audits for average Americans. So I think this is the right approach here. People need to pay what they owe, but I'd rather see us incentivize those actions rather than penalize people with aggressive actions.
All right. Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year, by the way, since I won't see you next week.
Thanks, Jen.
Still ahead on the National Desk.